The opinions and statements made by the guests of the Success in Practice podcast are their own, and I do not endorse or accept responsibility for their positions. Any information given by myself or the guests is educational in intention and not to be taken as medical advice. If you choose to act on the content involved in the podcast, you do so at your own risk. Okay, welcome back everybody to the Success in Practice podcast for another episode. Today I'm joined by Clifford Avery. Cliff Avery is an internationally trained and accredited osteopath who is the owner and principal practitioner of Sydney Osteopathic Medicine. Cliff qualified in London in 1994 at the British School of Osteopathy. Cliff's experience comes from treating a wide variety of people, including office workers, mums and dads and babies, students, as well as dancers and performers of the London's Royal Opera House and Sydney Opera House. He's treated many Olympic athletes, professional sports people, and some celebrities sprinkled in there as well. Cliff specialises in treating people suffering from acute and chronic back pain, whiplash injuries, coccydynia, headache and migraines, as well as treating many other conditions such as breathing difficulties, anxiety, and tension disorders. With his extensive experience in pain management, Cliff enjoys working with individuals that have been unsuccessful with other treatment modalities. As well as osteopathy, Cliff is also accredited in dry needling and shockwave therapy treatment. His treatment philosophy is that pain in the body is a natural indicator of discontent and dysfunction. He identifies and treats the underlying cause of the problem rather than simply treating the symptoms to achieve a more satisfactory result. Cliff is highly committed to perfecting his skills by continuing both Australian and international postgraduate training and keeping up to date with the latest international advances in osteopathic treatment. Cliff, thanks for joining me on the podcast, mate. Welcome. Good to finally sit down with you and have a chat.
Howdy. Well, doesn't everyone do that? That bio. It's nothing really different to the norm, is it?
Well, I've spoken to a lot of osteopaths who describe themselves as generalists, and they're usually my most interesting people because I think it's nice to I'm a generalist myself, so I like to sit with people who kind of treat a wide population base too. I think it's it is probably most predominant amongst osteopaths, but you do have people that are kind of niching down into certain aspects, but yeah, you're right. Most people are kind of, giving us their history or their background in a more of a generalized way. And it takes a bit of time, I think, to niche down, Cliff. I mean, you can't just kind of graduate and 3 years later you're treating, postpartum babies and pregnant mothers. It takes a bit of time for you to kind of see the breadth of the the population to get an idea of what's going on. But yeah, you're right.
That's why I like the chronic stuff, because that the chronicity, that takes a while to understand that and its development in the person and the person's needs behind that.
Yeah, I had a good chat to Fiona Pete many episodes ago. She's up on the northern beaches in Sydney, and she described as also when your own life experience is important too. As you kind of experience a lot of things in your life with your family and your children, and with yourself as well, you tend to get a better appreciation of a wider range of population that have kind of been through what you've been through, and you've been through what they've been through, and you can empathize a lot more. And I think that brings a better treatment approach.
Qualified in 1994. I mean, that's hilarious, isn't it? And I'm taking case histories and people were born in, 2004 and they're in front of me looking like an adult.
Yeah, no, it's a different time in osteopathy too now compared to 1994. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about that. So, but before we get into, some more detailed conversation about what you do with osteopathy, Cliff, give us a bit of background on you, mate. Tell us about you growing up. Tell us about your childhood, your family life, your school life, and then what finally got you into osteopathy?
Oh, back that far. Wow. Well, I always was, I shone at things that involve the physicality. So anything to do with my hands could adopt a skill quite easily. That might be driving a car, riding a motorbike, learning clay pigeon shooting, just anything of that nature. And at school, my favorite subject was biology and human biology. So eventually they came together. But prior to that, I was a hotel manager and a very
Right.
happy hotel manager. Well, I was kind of shuffling my feet, wondering what to do with the rest of my life. But I did sit down at one time and say to myself, for 2 months, Cliff, give yourself 10 minutes every day to just contemplate on what you may wish to do for the rest of your life. And I did it. It was about 4 weeks into that 2 month period where, and I talked to people because I wanted their ideas. And it was my now stepdad that said, I see you as an osteopath, Cliff.
Mm.
And I remember being excited before I knew what it was. And the excitement flushed over me. And then I said, Simon, what is an osteopath? And he described, because he had seen one in London. And I bought a book and it was entitled, What is Osteopathy? And I read that book in a weekend and I snapped it shut. And it was one of those light bulb moments. And there's been 3 strong ones in my life. And that was one where I just thought, that's it. I found my career. And I was on the bridging course studying anatomy and physiology for the BSO about 6 weeks later.
And tell me about that book. You said you read a book. What is osteopathy? Do you remember? I mean, that's you described that as one of the light bulb moments in your life.
Yeah, look,
Do you remember the details of that book?
It was a basic book in describing what osteopathy was about, but on reflection, it was substantially detailed. And I forget the author's name. And on shutting that book, though, I knew I'd found my career, and it was combining a skill set that is a physical skill set with a science and one of my passionate sciences, which was biology, human biology.
Yeah.
So at that point, I knew, and it wasn't long that I was later on that course in London, and I sat in front of a beautiful guy, Martin Collins, who collected degrees. He had zoology, he had osteopathy, was just one of his many degrees. And back in 1990, he was really, really excited about this new concept that he had come across called neuroplasticity. And he was all over that then and was marrying that up with osteopathy. And he thought that was just wonderful. And on that open day of that course, he had a lovely demo that he showed us, which was a Yellow Pages book. And he got us to hide, he hid a 5p coin, which is like our 5-cent coins. And we all had to come up individually and try and palpate over 5 or 6 pages that coin. And if we couldn't, then we stepped out and he kept putting more pages on until the last person in the room couldn't palpate the coin anymore. And then he turned around and we now hid the coin for Martin Collins. He came up and tried to palpate that and he got it every time. He started where we finished off and he added another 5 pages and another 5 pages and another 5 pages. And we thought, this is like some magic show. This is really good fun. And he was saying, look, guys, this is the art of palpation. And this is like a blind person seeing better or a deaf person seeing better and a blind person hearing better. He said, this is what you guys are going to learn to improve. And he said, and this is what will make you unique from other professions. This is osteopathy, the ability to palpate.
It's a real sixth sense, isn't it? Like a real one, not like it's an actual real sixth sense.
It is, isn't it? And that's, in my feelings, the old school osteopathy. I came across the career that was complete intuition and by chance. I knew it was the right career. Here we are, 30 years later, It's been a wonderful career. I feel as if it's gifted me an awful lot, and I feel very privileged and proud to be an osteopath. I'm very fortunate to have been an osteopath. And here was a scientist, a pure scientist, demonstrating to us palpatory skills and convincing us that this is what osteopathy is, and this is what we are going to train to become. And I just thought that was a really beautiful, as you say, it's a poetic sort of grace between something quite spiritual and at the same time a science that we all went off and studied in terms of physiology and anatomy.
Yeah, just all those principles tend to tie in together. Now that you kind of hindsight, you talked about the spirit and the anatomy and the physiology, and that's that's the first principle of what we do. Cliff, take us back to even before that, mate. Take us back to your childhood. What was that like? Where did you grow up? And tell us about school and how you felt about that. And then how did you end up at the BSO, at the British School of Osteopathy?
The school, I went to some very bad schools in Essex. They weren't good schools. Then mum and dad, through their divorce, we ended up in Suffolk, in the countryside. So we were east of London. We moved away from there. Now we're in good old sleepy Suffolk. Still not succeeding in schools. Mum and my new stepdad's business was starting to go a little bit better. And the next minute, I found myself in a private school at 14, really studying for the first time in my life. And I could read and write, but I didn't have much else. And I was now building up my education.
And were you a good young English kid in terms of, did you play a bit of football, a bit of rugby? What was your thing?
Athletics. I was very good at running. So that a private school is majorly pushed. Rugby, yes, but you're not allowed to do the things that you want to do. You get thrown into and pushed to do the things that you're good at. So I was beating kids 2 years above me that were twice my height, and before I knew it, I'm number one in Suffolk, and then I'm 200th best in England. And the geography teacher at the time, he was an England athletics coach, and he said, "I've got to get your parents down." He said, "Because you're in the top 200 now, and you're running on the streets by yourself. The top 500 all have coaches, and you need a coach, and you need school to be second." So he got my parents and down to the school, and I was trying to convince them that I need to have school in second to running and athleticism. To which my dad said, "Well, you can't make a living out of running." And back in 1984, you couldn't. So that was quashed. But I carried on running and did really well in terms of athletics, 1500, 800, and cross country.
Right. And so then you completed high school, or the equivalent of high school in England, and you're in Suffolk at the time. And then what made you? Did you go straight into osteopathy after completing high school? Did you have a bit of a break? What was that time like?
I did my O levels and did well in them. I got my A levels and did well in that. But then I didn't know what I wanted to do. So now I'm treading water for a little bit. And I found a course. It was called Recreation and Leisure. And at the time, it was pre-personal trainers, but personal trainers were starting to be born out of this era. And so I sort of treaded water for that couple of years. And do you know, that was a really good course. And there was a public speaking aspect on that course as well. That was very empowering. And from someone who was terrified of public speaking. So to complete that and to do that public speaking course gave me a lot of confidence. And I found myself at a disadvantaged school when we had to go and do some extracurricular studies, teaching disadvantaged kids, kids with MS and so forth, to swim, and the Downs children as well. And And that was a really fun time. Finished that, and then I've gone into hotels
Right.
and catering. And within a few years, I'm on the bar, I'm in the kitchen, I'm floor staff, but now I'm a duty manager for a hotel.
Right. And is this was this a fun time in your life? Was this something that you were enjoying at the time? You were kind of just going with the flow?
Oh God, no, it was hell. I hated it.
Right.
Yeah, it was not me at all. So I would have been
Okay.
about 24 now, 20, yeah, about 24. And I'm really giving some strong consideration as to what I want to do forevermore for the rest of my life, which is quite unique in osteopathy because, you know, I made a choice to be an osteopath, and
Hmm.
not many people, when I chat to my patients, actually choose their career. Their careers just evolve
Yeah.
what they are. They rarely
Hmm.
get opportunity that we get.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that you were encouraged by your stepfather to become an osteopath, and you read the book, and that was a bit of a light bulb moment for you. Then how did you find out about education in terms of becoming an osteopath? Like, did you just go and look at it and say, oh, there was a couple of schools, I think, around in that period. There would have been a couple
Yeah,
of options. Why did you
yeah.
choose the British School of Osteopathy? And yeah, give us a bit of insight on that.
It was the main one. And we had in Maidstone, Kent, we had the ESO, the European School of
Mm,
Osteopathy.
mm,
That was smaller. This one was in the centre of London. It was walking distance between Piccadilly, Trafalgar Square. It was like opposite the Phantom of the Opera that played for 25 years. It was in a street called Suffolk Street, right in the centre of London, and it was the main school. So this is pre sat navs. This is pre Google. So
mm.
you would have to go to the yellow pages. You would have to look at where these schools are. You'd have to look at directories. You'd have to call them up. You'd have to go to an open day. You'd have to see it in person. There's no emails yet.
Yeah, right. And you were pretty excited about starting osteopathy there. Like, were you excited? Were you anxious? Were you nervous? What was that like for you?
It was terrifying because I had A levels in government and political studies and economics,
Mm,
and they wanted anatomy, physiology, and biology. And to them, I was considered a young student. So the
right.
advice at the time was go away, get another degree. Why don't you go and do an anatomy degree, for instance, and then come back in 3 or 4 years' time, and we'll consider taking you on then.
That's interesting because you would have been a more of a mature age. I mean, it's not like you were straight out of high school. You'd
Right?
had a little bit of life experience, and they still considered you as a young student.
Their average age at that time was in late 30s and early 40s
Wow.
students.
Tell us, I mean, given your experience now in hindsight, tell us why you think that is. Why do you think there was such an age, an experience age into osteopathy in those days of the BSO?
Oh, they very much pushed away school grads. They considered them, they felt as if the course was for people that needed a certain maturity and
Mm,
life skills. So they actively pushed away any school grad, even if they could pay the fees. They weren't keen on school grads. For me, I
yeah.
think it was a combination of early 20s and them wanting the criteria to make it work,
Yeah,
as in physiology.
it's funny how the world's changed. I think they're looking for students now. I think it's a bit of a tough time over there for the BSO. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting one. Okay, so
But that bridging course they sent me on, I have to tell you, I've never worked so hard in all my life. That
mm,
was insane. It was 8 weeks. And there were a whole heap of tutors. I remember looking at a degree book in chemistry, and it was an American degree book. And they said, look, we're going to go 2/3 through this. And look, they got us all along at the same time. They pushed us all along. They made sure everyone was at speed. But oh my gosh, it was incredibly insane. I
Mm.
I would leave there, and I would go back and carry on the prep. I would probably get 2 or 3 hours sleep, and then start the next morning and the whole day, and it just kept going on, on. But I was so desperate to get on that course. I thought, if I can just get on the course, I know I'll succeed if I can get on it. But I just need to get on the course.
It sounded like you enjoyed the content though, like you were geared that way, wired that way in your brain. Is that correct?
Oh, when not for chemistry, but when
Right.
the anatomy, yes, and the physiology, yes. And when I got on the course, then you couldn't get me out of the library. If anyone said
Mm.
Cliff, it'd be in the library. And I
Right.
would find myself reading curricula that was like way off course, but I didn't care. Days were going past, and I was
Mm.
just fascinated.
Right. Okay. So Cliff turns up to first day, first week of osteopathy school at the BSO. What was that like? Did you get a sense of I'm in deep now, was that a bit nerve wracking for you? What was that first week like of university when you actually had the osteopathy component? I mean, I know university encompasses a whole lot more, or maybe I don't think it was university then. It's a school. It's a college.
It
And
was, yeah.
yeah. So when you got there and it was your first week, your first your first kind of introduction to osteopathy, was that how did you take that? Were you a bit anxious, or was it something that you really look forward to?
Because I've been smashed in anatomy and physiology for the last month, I felt quite confident. And when we started the lectures, of course, we started recovering some of what I'd already been over. I felt
Mm.
it was worse, I think, and of course, then I was with a whole heap of people I already knew. Whereas on that first day, there's a whole heap of newbies that didn't know anyone.
Mm.
Walking up to one guy and just introducing myself. See, I was looking a bit wildered. And we're still buddies now. And he's like, "Thanks for coming up and saying hello on that day." And I'm like, "Well, you looked a bit lost, you know." And it was, yeah. So I didn't actually feel that insecure, not as insecure as I did on that bridging course.
Right.
But you
And
mentioned the school.
go ahead.
It's interesting, the school, because
Mm.
they call it a school, but yeah, you're right. It's a college, and it wasn't a uni, and it was purely for osteopathy. They did nothing else in that entire premise.
Um, Tell us about when you first laid your hands on somebody. What was that like? Was that a bit, were you unsure of what's going on there? Like, how did you take that?
That would have been in probably the first hour of the first day, and that was a bit of
Mm.
a shock to the system, because we walked into a large room, and there was about 50 of us, and then they asked us to all try and dress to our underwear. So people have got
Yeah.
G-strings on, holy underwear, dirty underwear, and of course by day number two, everyone's got Calvin Kleins on and beautiful
Yeah.
underwear. But so we immediately got to know each other quite well, and
I think every osteopath, sorry to cut you off there, Cliff,
yeah, go on.
every single osteopath can relate. Well, I know that probably every osteopath pre 2015, I would say, that has been through any kind of college or university program can relate to the last little bit of conversation that we just had about getting in there on the first day, getting your gear off in the undies, going, what the hell? It's like, the only time you'd probably ever gotten your gear off was to get changed before a football match or a cricket match or whatever it was. And now you're doing it in front of 30 strangers and two lecturers, and everyone's looking at you. It's not like you're just getting your gear off and going for a swim down to the beach. Everyone's actually
Not
looking
at
at you
all.
and going, "Is his nipple height higher on the left than the right one? Look, his shoulders bigger on one side than the other." It's not only are you got your gear off, you're under a microscope, and every little part of you that's you may have been conscious about for the last 30 years is everyone's talking about it. You
That's
know,
right. That's right.
yeah.
Back then, I think it was a little bit more liberal than it is now. You know,
Oh yeah, yeah,
we were doing PR examinations and anal wink tests and prostate examinations and squeezing nipples for breast examinations. And yeah, it was the whole kabang.
yeah. I remember, you know, getting down, and as a young man, I had a little bit of acne, and I had some acne here on my chest, just a little bit of And the lecturer on the day just very nonchalantly just pointed out, well, that's a drainage issue, and she's talking about all this kind of drainage and congestion in the chest and all this kind of stuff, and that's why there's a bit of I'm like, oh my god, did she just point out the fact that I'm a grown man and I've still got a little bit of acne? It's but yeah, I think everybody can relate to that, and it's traumatic in the moment. It's like a bad date, it's traumatic in the moment.
Yes.
You look back at it and you're very fond of it.
Oh, we've laughed about it, and they were wonderful times. Did you have a lecture called like observation, where you just stand there and stare at each other? Did you have that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, oh, yeah. We the first week, the first day, we all got down and we did the 10-step Greenman screening. The Phil Greenman that wrote the Principles of Manual Medicine.
Right.
He's got this 10-step screening process, and so everybody got paired up. Everybody's down into their DAX and their undies, and everyone's this one person's doing the gait. All right, everybody, let's look at the gait cycle. Sammy, go walk up and down, and I had my red undies on. I never figured I had red undies. I don't know why. You just pick the underwear out of your closet and put them on, and I'm walking up and down, and look at his foot, and look at his knee, and look at his hip, and look at his this and that. I'm like, oh my god, yeah, definitely, yeah, we all did that, and everyone's looking at you. Just the whole class is just staring. And then your turn's done, and then someone else's turn comes along, and everyone gets to look at them.
But I used to think that was a really nonsensical. I mean, we would all giggle. We had a French guy that would stand there saying, "Look at the contours of the body," and we all loved his voice. Look at the shoulders. Look at the height, and we would all giggle and look at each other. But later on and in clinic, it's amazing what we see, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And people come in and they might have an indentation, a sulcus in their chest, and fibrosis in their back, some stretch marks with osteochondrosis, and we see what many people don't see.
Oh, Cliff, I think it's past, it's beyond the clinic. I mean, it's really hard for me to go to the beach and just lay there, and
Right.
and my wife's looking at me, going, "What are you looking at?" I'm just like, "What are you looking at that person for?" I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
I think there's their knee. It's it's like, look how their knee caves in when they walk.
Yeah, his left hip's going. Yeah,
Yeah, and you're just walking down. You're in the shopping center, and you go. I looked at my wife because my wife's a podiatrist. And I was like, have a look at the pronation on that one. Like it's not nice. I think it ends up being like it ends up being like that Seinfeld, that finale episode where you're just being socially awkward, and everyone. If people actually got a bit of a view into your mind, they'd probably have a giggle and a laugh at you and think you're a bit creepy. But amongst us osteopaths, it's a point of it's something when we discuss it. I mean, me and you have just met and we've just talking and we're having a bit of a giggle about it. I can imagine just meeting an osteopath and connecting over something like that. That's been funny to me for my entire career, and obviously been quite entertaining for you as well, and something you've noticed about yourself. And we love it. I don't think it's something we really take to it. It's part of our persona as a professional, Yeah.
And it's good that we can't switch off. Yes.
Yeah, it's tough, but it's I mean, it is good that we can't switch off. I don't think I want to switch off just yet. Like, it's still it needs to be there. I think just having that keen eye. But I'm sure there's other professions that have a similar eye for things. Like if you speak to a stonemason and he comes over your place and he's having a look at your bench tops, your stone bench tops, he'll pick things out that you would never ever see.
Yes.
So nothing wrong with that.
We done once, and he says, "What do you think of the kitchen?" And his name was John. I said, "I think it's amazing, John. It's really good." He said, "I'm not happy with it." I'm like, "You're not?" He goes, "No." And he's looking at little angles because the doors weren't quite,
Yeah, so definitely, I think it's just part of being somebody who takes pride in their work and what they do. You've got to be attentive to the minutiae of things, I think, and the detail of it. So definitely something we can connect over. Even when you meet professionals and other osteopaths, you go to a conference or a night out or something, and you talk to people, you just connect straight away because of these things that you've shared in education. Um, Cliff, let's look at the. I want to look at your early career. So you did osteopathy. Before I move on to your early career, who were some of the lecturers that you look back on in your time and go, I'm really glad I had people of that caliber teaching me. Who were the people over at the BSO that influenced you early on in your I guess education?
Yeah, we had some amazing lecturers. Like, we were near all the hospitals in London, so they would. Surgeons are amazing anatomists. So for
Mm,
anatomy, we would have one of the local surgeons come in, and he would arrive with his little half glasses and his dicky bow, and absolutely brilliant, hilariously funny, very
mm,
entertaining, and just very fluid. After that, we would go to Guy's Hospital and we'd go to the wet lab. And then somewhere in between, before we did that, we'd probably then go to an osteopath who did another degree in functional anatomy, and then he would get the dead cadavers parts moving and the interlink between them, and that was brilliant too. So every single week there was a new aspect. Um, Tim Oxborough at the time was lecturing, and he was brilliant, and everyone loved him, and they loved his lectures and uh, his bonding of anatomy, but making it osteopathic in its appliance.
mm,
And he was a massive influence. So when I saw on the little notice board one day that Tim was after two people to work with him, and in those days, you're allowed to state, I want a male and I want a female. And I'm like, I have to go for that job. And I was nearing the end of my degree. And I think I was lucky because it was in Suffolk and I lived near Tim. So I'm sure that swung
mm.
it for me because I was a local boy and I was coming back to Suffolk. And so I had an interview with Tim and I scored the male role of that job. Claire Farley got the female role and she was a great woman. And we had many years there working with him who couldn't take his teaching hat off, and his clinic was really tightly ran. He was very kind and very generous with his time and his money, but he wanted a pound of flesh for that. We weren't allowed to go out at lunchtime. If we didn't have someone to treat, he wanted us to study or go in with him. It was very much
Mm.
a teaching environment, but he gave us amazing principles and was an incredible osteopath. He was that osteopath that everyone traveled miles to go to, and
Mm.
past 50 osteopaths on their way just to see Tim because he did something different to other osteopaths. We had an excellent relationship with the local practice, the doctor's practice. They would refer people. Their children came in. They referred patients. They would ask us to come around and share lunch with them and tell us how we treat the babies and the kids. It was a really good environment that he had created in this sleepy township, Suffolk.
Right. So you mentioned that a lot of people travel to see Tim
Mm.
and that he did things a little bit differently than other osteopaths. Tell us, can you explain that? What do you think was different about his approach that made him stand out?
Well, I used to laugh and say, Tim, because I'd sit on his desk, swinging my legs like a kid, just watching him treat. And he would always entertain and bring me into the environment as he's treating. He liked the collective, he liked the group atmosphere, the family, the practice became his family. He, I would say to him, Tim, you just appear to do what everyone else does, but yet you do amazing things in getting people better. What is it that you do and other people don't do? And he always used his reply was always the same. He'd say, it's not exactly what you do, Cliff, it's the mental intent behind what you do. And Tim certainly had some magic behind him and a very, very good following.
Right.
And he would say to me, he'd say, now, Cliff, if you ever have a problem, just come out, knock on my door, of which I did every day. And he would excuse himself with his patient. He would come out. He would ask. I'd say, Tim, I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not confident if it's the pelvis, if it's this. He'd walk into the room. He'd examine, ask the person a few questions, and then he would always hold my dignity and say, Cliff, it was as you were saying outside the room. And then, of course, he'd go on to tell me exactly what I needed to do. And would you like me to do that adjustment? Are you okay? And we just talked very openly, and the patient would love it. They would think they're getting this extra from this older principal practitioner. They thought that was wonderful. And he always held my dignity.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I remember a lot of the time I would get him in because I would feel something, I'd palpate something, and then it would disappear. And he would, after about a year, he said, "You keep getting me in on a near daily basis, or every other day. You ask me to palpate the very thing that you feel, and then I quantify what you're feeling." He said, "Look," he said, "you're obviously putting a wall up with your palpation. You know, you're not believing yourself in what you're feeling. So take that wall down, and when you feel it, even if you feel it once, just take that for fact. Because by doubting what you're feeling is your brick wall." That little tip had my palpation go from one level to levels that I didn't think was possible. And just kept applying that same principle to palpation. And every time I thought I hit another wall of what was reasonable or my ability to palpate, it would reach new levels when I used that same principle again.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things I say to the students that work with me. I was like, your first instinct is more often than not the right one. You know, your first palpatory instinct is on the mark. Go with that. You know, and that other osteopaths I've spoken to have said the same thing. You just said the same thing, and it's like, you know, there's good, you know, what we call inter-rater reliability there. So that's good. I wanted to ask you, was there ever a time in your career when you, even later on, I mean, you know, even maybe after you kind of come to Australia and you were treating somebody, and you might get these doozies and you go, "I just stuck here. I don't know what to do." Did you ever think, or did you still ever think to yourself, what would Tim do? Like, does that get you out of trouble?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, I don't know what to do, but I'm just going to do what I think Tim would do.
Yeah.
And then,
channel Tim.
Exactly. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank everyone for watching and listening to the podcast. If you have received value from this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel on whichever platform that you are listening on. If any of the conversations have resonated with you and you feel that I can help elevate your practice, you can find me at successinpractice.net. That is, the Success in Practice program can be found at successinpractice.net. The Success in Practice program is the signature program that takes a practitioner who may be struggling with retaining patients. They may not be certain about building effective treatment strategies, and they may feel somewhat anxious and doubtful about what they are going to do with a patient. And they are not really accelerating in the real world of private practice. It takes this practitioner and it turns their careers right around to the point where the patients have an effective diagnosis and a real treatment plan that they can take home. Patients are happy to book in multiple sessions with you, and they are confident about your abilities. And more importantly, you now have direction and are confident about your own abilities. The program streamlines how you operate as a practitioner. Guys, you should have been taught this at university, but you weren't. You may have been practicing for the last few years thinking there has to be a better way. There has to be a more effective way of engaging with patients and getting them results. Well, there is. And this is what the program delivers. Go to successinpractice.net and check out the options available to you. See where I can help you easily grow your patient list and finally earn the rewarding income that you deserve. For all the information on how you can reach me personally, check out the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find a link to the chat transcripts from these podcasts. These are valuable and a wealth of information. I really hope that you're enjoying the podcast. Guys, leave a comment if there's any questions on this episode. And please, don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Now, back to the show.
Absolutely. I've done that all my career. His grounding, when we come out safe, don't we? But we're not good. We come out safe. I thought I was great when I came out. I thought treat anything, and probably everyone arrogantly thinks that. And but we come out safe. It was working with Tim that I felt as if my learning began. So any student that can have any mentoring or any buddy, it's so important.
Cliff, I want to ask you about your early career. So tell us about your I guess your first foray into practice. Where did you practice? Where were you? What were you doing? And how were those first, say, 5 years of practice for you?
After leaving college, I would have done 2 locums, one in Essex, one in Yorkshire. So I just dived in the deep end and, just saw other osteopaths list. But having finished over 1,000 hours in clinic, I remember sitting in front of the first person with every confidence that I'll be able to give them something, which I think, we're pretty well prepared, aren't we? How amazing that we'll come out of college and then be confronted by another human being and be confident that we can actually help them in some way, shape, or form. So I did a couple of locums, but I had Tim Oxford's job lined up, and he needed me on a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday, which I was living at home at the time. I've been a student for like 4.5 years. That was just fantastic. Just to work 3 days a week and earn money and live at home on the bank of mum and dad. I mean, it was just brilliant. I bought a motorbike and I just rode around Suffolk on the motorbike every other day. Every day was like a Friday. Yeah, I never backed up 2 days together. So it was a wonderful first few years of my life. And I remained with Tim for about 4.5 years. And he knew I was applying for immigration. I said, Tim, I'm on sabbatical. He's like, you're coming back, aren't you? I'm like, yes, of course I am. I'm just going on sabbatical. But I had applied for immigration. And this was one of those other intuitive moments because everyone was like, you're going to live there? I'm like, yep. They're like, well, you must love it in Australia. I said, well, I don't know. I've never been. And they're like, well, why are you going there then? I'm like, I don't know. I just think it'd be a really good move. And it was. And it wasn't long after arriving here with residency that I knew I'd made the right move.
And so, had you done any research at the time as to whether you could work in Australia? Did you know that you were going to come into an environment where you could kind of just slot in and work as an osteopath? Or what was the viewpoint then?
Yeah. No, they were accepting the degree that the UK had, like for like. The only problem at that time was New South Wales didn't accept the qualification, but Victoria did. And if you joined in Victoria, you could then swap it in the same week to New South Wales once you got your Victorian membership.
Yeah, right. So it was a bit of a backdoor entry for you into New South Wales.
Yeah.
Okay. And so go ahead.
Well, it was with absolute naivety and stupidity, probably, because I would have only had money to support myself for 3 months. And after which time, if I didn't have a job, then I was back on the boat home. So it was a really frantic.
You would have found a hotel to work in here.
Right, exactly.
I'm saying you would have just gone back to working into a hotel and enjoyed the sunshine.
I would have had to, exactly. But I hated it. I'm qualified as osteopath.
No, I think in hindsight now, Cliff, when you look back at it, I mean, you probably think 3 months is plenty of time. I think you would have hit the ground running within about a month, right?
I did, luckily.
Like you would have been. You would have been financially viable within a month. You would have been.
I was, yeah. It took
making
about
good money. Yeah.
But tax file numbers. I mean, I didn't have a credit card. I didn't have a bank account here. Everything was brand new.
Yeah, but it was such an open. When I say open, I mean it was such those days. I mean, you're in the 90s. I'm assuming it would have been just a very fertile place for osteopathy.
Yeah,
it would have been you would have gone in and people would have really taken to what you had to give them. And I think like looking back on it, you'd probably go, well, yeah, I wouldn't have really struggled. And within 3 or 4 weeks, I think you would have found yourself with a pretty full listing of patients wherever you went.
I didn't, but I had every confidence. But I got into a practice. It managed to pay some bills, and but it took a while to build up. it did take a while, and I had a real confidence crisis then because I had uprooted myself for the first time, and it was very, very unsettling because I had no contacts. I had nobody, and and I'd been busy in Suffolk in the UK and felt important, and then coming here and seeing two people in the morning and two in the afternoon, and lots of gaps in between, twiddling my thumbs and feeling very insecure in that time in between. But hey, look, patience and perseverance. I heard an old physio once on TV. They were trying to promote him to Dan tonight because he was getting quadriplegics to move and paraplegics walking and all sorts. And you know, they were sensationalizing it. And he said, no, he said, it's patience and perseverance. Some people in this room that have been working with me for 2 years just to operate a computer. And I stole those words off them. I thought, yeah, that's really profound. I like those two words, patience and perseverance. Miracles come with patience.
What part of Sydney did you begin to work in? Where was your first place in Sydney that you worked at?
Well, Tim Oxborough went to school with Julie Fendel, and he said, "You've got to go and work with Julie Fendel." He's like, she's an amazing osteopath. Everyone loved her at school. She's still a great osteopath, and she lives and works in Sydney, which is where I wanted to come. He's like, you have to go and work with Julie Fendel. But I arrived here, and Fendel was in maternity leave, and but then another 2 children later, she was still on maternity leave a decade later. So I worked with her husband, Robert, for a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I'm pretty sure they're quite indirect practitioners. Did you find that you kind of had a similar approach or a mindset to osteopathy? Were there any hurdles that you had to address to kind of fit into the culture of what they were trying to do within their practice?
Yeah, look, I after leaving Tim's practice, which we had a children's day on a Wednesday, which was a day of chaos, and we never ran to time. We got all the kids and the babies on the Wednesday, and we would go into the rooms in 2s and 3s, and Tim would give our split. It was always 50-50 back in those days, but Tim would give our split for the other 2 people and take the hit himself because he really wanted us to learn from that environment. Having left that environment and arriving in the CBD of beautiful Sydney, I didn't want to work that way, and the CBD isn't a good environment for babies and children and parents to get in with prams. And I really enjoyed the buzz of the CBD. I enjoyed the bankers, the lawyers, the judges, the accountants, and I was happier moving over to a more structural, even though I'd done numerous cranial courses and Sutherland courses and was a strong follower back in the UK.
Okay. And so, all right. So you spent a bit of time there at that clinic. When did you finally decide to either go out on your own or join ranks with somebody, or what was the progression for you? Did you then decide you wanted to have your own practice? How long did that take to, materialize in your brain?
I wanted to purchase something in the city. I didn't want to rent. Every time rent came round, I saw which direction it only went north. It never went south. And I thought, this is just unfeasible if this just carries on. I've got another 25 years plus. And so I wanted to purchase something. And Peter Green was round the corner. We'd have coffee like the Reserve Bank on the first Tuesday of every month. And we'd just go out and have a coffee and talk shit about things. And Peter would always say, come and join us. And I'm like, no, it's a sideways movement. I want to buy some real estate. Anyway, Peter, I had 10 missed calls on my phone one day, and Peter's business partner at the time was leaving, and Peter needed someone because he had purchased the practice along with his partner. He's like, I need you to buy in. I need you to buy in because otherwise I'm in the shit. So I bought him with Peter. And
were you looking at when you said you want to buy something? Were you talking about a business? Were you talking about actual real estate? In terms of a clinic, a bricks and mortar clinic?
Both, yeah. I wanted the real estate. Yeah. I wanted, I'm looking down the line, we're a given business and I didn't want to chase the dollar. I wanted to be able to be generous when a single mum came in, and I wanted to be able to give back to community a little bit. And it I just wanted to own that business, and therefore to be able to share that a little bit when I can. And this was one of Tim's principles. Tim was a very generous man. You know, he's paying 2 practitioners in the room full pay. You know, and he's taking the loss. But Tim had also set himself up quite well financially. You know, he had owned his practice, he owned his house opposite. You know, so he got himself in a good position. So I was looking at Tim's model of just trying to get some stability, because we earn a good income, but we don't earn a good income if we don't invest it wisely and if we don't do anything good with the money that we earn. And it's manual income, and one day we physically can't work, or we're too tired to work, and we have to be in a position to be able to sustain ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I get asked this question all the time. I think we can make a comfortable living as osteopaths, but you really need to invest your money wisely, because I mean, you're not going to be a millionaire being an osteopath, because there's only so many people you can see, you know, and then there's only so many associates that you've got access to. And you know, the largest clinics will probably turn up, and I'm talking about pure osteopathy. I'm not talking about osteopathy with, you know, a Pilates gym attached to it. I'm talking about pure treatment models. You know, you know, like you're going to max out. I mean, how many patients are you going to see? You know, 100 and something a week. You know, what are you going to do? Like that's pushing. And so you're going to make a comfortable living, and you should use that cash flow. And that's exactly what it is. It's a good cash flow business, because you know, patients come to see you, they get treated, they pay on the spot. Banks love you because you're not waiting, you know, a month to get your pay. You're not waiting, like, you know, if you're someone in construction, they're usually waiting to get their payments after the job's finished. Whereas you're getting paid as soon as that patient leaves.
And the overheads aren't high either. You know, we don't have massive runs.
Yeah, that's right. And geez, okay, we'll have a discussion about that. But the overheads at the moment now have gone up, I think quite a bit, if you, depending on the type of clinic you run, I guess, but with wages the way they are now, and if you got admin staff and so forth. But I had this conversation with Kevin Finnan on the podcast many episodes ago, and he's a really good business guy. And his idea was, with osteopathy, either you go big or you go home. And what that means is that you're either going to have these big clinics with, like, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 practitioners, or you're going to be a 1 or 2 practitioner kind of operating, you know, and that 1 or 2 practitioner model, where you can keep your overheads quite low, and you can kind of just, when you work, you make money, but if you take a holiday, you probably don't make any money, you know. Or you can go that big model where you've got, you know, 7, 8, 9 practitioners, but then your overheads are high, and you're really making maybe 10% off each person,
and then
that's how you're making your income.
Yeah,
and you're juggling, you know.
You're juggling there's always someone leaving. There's always someone needing training, and
I think both models have their anxieties attached to them. But I'm finding that as the more experienced osteopaths get, the more they want to go to that smaller model. They're sick of the, you know, the having to juggle large practices and doing all that. But yeah, I tend to. But going back to your story, so you bought in with Peter Green.
Yeah.
Did you guys have the real estate? Because I know you said you wanted to buy the real estate too.
Yeah.
Was that part of it for you? Did you buy the part of the business and the real estate?
Yeah. Everything went 50-50, and it is that lean model. It's that CBD. It's that small. It's 3 rooms. It's, you know, Peter, myself, another practitioner.
Yeah.
And then my wife came into it as well. You know, she's a highly organized person. And when she walked into the practice and started saying, "Boys, what are you doing here?" and just putting systems in place. And then Peter and I backed off a lot more. And she started doing the wages, she started doing the super, and we could just be osteopaths again, which is what we want to do, because we enjoy doing what we're doing. And we like to have fun at work.
That's right.
So then Melissa took on greater responsibility. She became like this practice manager who we implicitly trust, and doesn't show any bias towards me. And we have a great relationship, all three of us, and Peter and her have a great relationship, and it just works.
Yeah, I can
We couldn't
imagine you
make it
guys will
work.
be having a good time. Yeah,
We,
I mean, I know Peter. Peter's a funny guy. Peter taught me over at UWS back in those days when he was teaching there. So I'll speak to Peter. We'll try to get him on the podcast as well. It'll be good to chat to.
we like to laugh a lot. There's always laughter in the practice. In fact, Peter will knock on my
Yeah,
door and say, "What are you laughing at in this room?"
yeah.
To which I'll
Yeah.
say, "Mind your own business. Go find your own laughter."
Well, yeah, he had a pretty bellowing laugh from memory, Peter. You know, it wasn't a dainty little laugh either, was
Yeah,
it? So
it's not a little titter, is it? No. We do have some fun. We have a lot of fun. Yeah, we and patients enjoy that too. It's a light-hearted
yeah,
practice.
yeah. And I want to ask you. I know that back in your time in Suffolk, Tim used you as I guess, a an osteopathic assistant. Would that be correct?
Hmm.
And is that a similar model that you'd like? Would you like to have that kind of model where you have maybe an osteopathic student that you take on and you have them as your assistant and you teach them the manual skills and the therapy and the tissue work and the fascia work and so forth? Is that a model that or do you just happy working on your own and doing everything on by yourself?
I don't feel as if that model works anymore. I feel as if we've probably grown out of that model. So, we have an associate, Jerome, awesome guy, and he's very much his own man, and with his own website, and
Mm,
and we encourage that. He works under the banner,
yeah,
but we very much encourage that and the promotion of himself. But he came to us as an osteopath that's already had experience. He didn't need
yeah.
help and support in any way, and he's
Mm,
he's very strong in his personality. He's his own man. Um,
mm,
but Peter and I are at that stage where we there has been a chap who wants some mentoring, and so
mm,
for him, and he's come through beautiful Alison Lynn, and it's like, okay, you come through Alison, and we met him. He's wonderful, and so we want to give back, and we want to be able to
mm.
get someone who's in that position that time. So we're like, yeah, come and work with us, and let's support you like we were supported.
Yeah. Well, that's what I meant. I think I might have worded it correctly, but I know you've got Jerome there, who's he's a qualified osteopath. But I was more talking as a student. So if you had a student who was still studying osteopathy, is that somebody who you'd like to kind of bring into the clinic, have them observe you, have them maybe learn some tissue work off you, have them even do some part of the treatment so that they could be involved with you? Is
Always
that a
welcome.
model that you?
Yeah,
Sorry, say that again.
always welcome. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Can't talk
So
for
that's
Peter.
great.
He'll say,
And that
"Oh,
was,
hell no, hell no."
uh, I'm assuming that's what you did with Tim, correctly? Like that,
Yeah.
whilst you were a student, is that right?
Not whilst a student, no, when I qualified.
1 year qualified, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess you'd be an advocate of, say, the uh, not maybe the apprenticeship model, but more so, the internship model. Having
Yeah.
student interns. Is that something you'd be an advocate for?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, I guess moving on, then we've discussed your foray into private practice and what you're doing now with Peter. We discussed also at the beginning of this podcast um, your work with diverse populations, and you've worked with athletes to dancers, to performers in the opera, and also some celebrities sprinkled in there as well. Um, Tell us, I guess, what you like so much about seeing the different diverse populations. Like, what do you enjoy mostly about seeing an athlete in one appointment and then turning around and having a look at, say, just an everyday, maybe a grandpa who's suffering from some arthritic arthritic type conditions? Like, how do you go from switching your mindset? Is that something you enjoy doing?
Not really. I don't enjoy treating the athletes either. They're a pain in the butt, aren't they? They just want to go out there and wreck my
Yeah,
good work and do it all again. I mean, I used
yeah.
to work in a sports medicine clinic, and I'm like, I can't do this. It's just annoying me.
Mm,
I want to treat people that actually want to get better and stay feeling better. So, and look, I mean, these days we don't see retirees in the city because it's in the city, but we see a lot of
mm.
suits, and we see a mass of different occupations. Which, I mean, it's not all about them, is it? It's about us as well, because we've got a vast decade in the career. I thoroughly enjoy the personalities and the different careers that we get in, and the information that comes from them. I mean, it just blows my mind. Um, Two people told me about the global financial crisis 8 months before it even hit the newspapers in in Sydney. It's like
Yeah.
it's just incredible, the diversity of the people that we see and the insight we get.
You're not wrong. One of the things is I went out to a trivia night with a couple of friends, and with our wives and their wives and so forth. And there was a group of about six of us on the table, and the trivia comes along, and it's all general stuff, and they'd be just firing away questions, and I've just got the answers, just go bang bang bang. They go, how do you know all this? I said, I talk to 40 different people every day,
Right.
and that's exactly what you're talking about, right? Like, you see so many different people, and you get to have a chat to them, and they teach you so many different things. I think we miss that. We see it, and when we talk about it, I guess we understand it. But in the moment, I don't think we realize how much education our patients are giving us.
Absolutely, yeah. It blows my mind and fascinates me at the same time. Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember when.
you'd be getting the cream of the crop down the CBD too. The lawyers and the judges and the accountants and those guys, they'd have a lot of stories to tell you.
It really is, and sometimes, whoops, sometimes there might be a high case profile on TV, and I'm treating the barrister, and Peter's treating the judge, and I see him on TV, and I'm on the phone. Peter, we mustn't let judge come in with barrister, and blah blah blah. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's quite fun.
yeah, it would be. It would be. It's something that makes your job enjoyable.
But at the end of the day, look, different backgrounds and different cultures and different professions, but they're all people, aren't they? They're all just bones and an and on that bio, that there was one bit. What's it say? Oh, yeah, Cliff specializes in treating people suffering from, and so many times I see on websites, that people treat sciatica, and I treat lumbago, and I treat migraines, and it's like, no, we're not. We're all treating people.
Should we just put a full stop after suffering?
Yeah.
Cliff specializes in treating people suffering.
I'm suffering as well.
Yeah. So no, you make a good point. I think, yeah, you're right. I think they're all just, it is. And that's the beauty of osteopathy, is that, we do say that, with athletes and dancers and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, right? Like, you're seeing similar strain patterns. People are kind of coming in with problems and it's anatomy and physiology in front of you. You're still applying osteopathy. I mean, I've had some conversations with people over the advanced titling that's going on at the moment. I don't know if you're aware of that, through the association, where you can show a bit of I guess whether you've done some extra research or extra work, or some kind of field work, or some kind of research work into an area like pediatrics or sports medicine or rehabilitation. You can have an advanced title. It's not something I'm I'm not overly comfortable about it, because I think as osteopaths, there's an advanced title for pain management. I'm thinking, Cliff, you do pain management every day, every single patient that you see. And I don't know why that would make somebody else more advanced at pain management than like you or Peter or me or anyone else that sees quite a good volume of patients who are in pain every day. And so, yeah, I
And
guess to your
to get
point,
the title, what do you got to do? Do a course, jump through a hoop to then be able
yeah,
to put
there's
the
stuff. I mean,
website?
you've got to show some research and put together some case studies and so forth. I mean, it can be done. I'm sure it can be, but people are busy. They've got things to do, and they've got and the thing is, you're treating. I mean, you're in the trenches. You're treating. It's not like what do I got to do to prove this to you? Like I have to show you my appointment book. But look, I don't want to get into that conversation. It's not the reason why I'm talking to you. But I guess the point I want to make is that osteopaths, it's our thought process that sets us apart to the other professionals, right? To the chiropractors and the physiologists and so
Yeah,
forth.
yeah,
And we're applying that thought process no matter who we're seeing in front of us. I think
yeah,
that's the key
yeah,
thing, right? Would
yeah.
you agree with that?
I would indeed. And osteopathic principles, whether it's an elderly person or an athlete or a barrister, it doesn't matter. The osteopathic principles are the same with everyone.
Yeah. And the segue into the next question is a good one because I've asked this to a few practitioners, and I'm going to ask you the same question based on your work and your experience, Cliff.
Mm.
What is osteopathy?
Mhm.
That's the title of the book that you read, wasn't it?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah. So give us an answer, Cliff. I'm going to put you on here. What do you think osteopathy? What's osteopathy? What's an osteopath?
yeah. I always explain to my patients that our job is to get their body back to its homeostatic being, its norm, its average, its homeostasis, where it was before any injury.
Right. And I guess I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. If I was a chiropractor and I said the same thing, how would that make me different to you, or how would that make you different to me?
Because as a
Like
chiropractor,
if I, as a chiropractor, if I said, look, my job is to get the body back to a normative state of homeostasis, um,
you would have a different
why are you
philosophy
different?
and you would do it a different way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So really, what you're saying is what sets us apart is our principles and our philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where everyone. It's funny. It's where everybody gets to. It's as we break it down, everybody gets to the principles and the philosophy. And the reason why I ask this question to most of the practitioners that I talk to is because I always say I think we need to get our act together as a profession and really start to define what we do a little bit better, because I think the way that regulatory bodies are going these days, it's kind of like they're all trying to make us look the same across the professions. And I think the beauty is in the point of difference, right? Like it's good to be different. It's good for the physios to be different than us, and it's good for us to be different than them in terms of the way we approach things. I don't think this homogenous approach to allied health is a really healthy thing. It's not good for the market because the consumer needs different approaches. Um,
As
and
in,
and
are you
and
saying
I think
affiliated, as in chiros and physios and osteopaths affiliated?
yeah, I think the way that regulatory, well, when we talk about regulatory bodies, really it's APRA here. I mean, the way that they regulate tries to kind of make, and the way that education's going now, it's all being taught in a similar way. I mean, you look at the degrees and the content, it's kind of all being taught in a quite a homogenous way. And I get why that's happening. I understand it. But I think there still needs to be a point of difference, by osteopaths. Like we need to be different than, and we need to at least state clearly why we're different. Especially in your marketing, Cliff. I mean, you run a clinic. You need to tell somebody why you're different than a physiotherapist, and why you're different than a chiropractor, and why you're different than an exercise physiologist.
That's why people
Yeah.
come,
So
because
as
they're normally failing
yeah.
with another practitioner or two. That's why they've
Mm.
come in the first place. It,
Yeah, and I think we got to get our act together and really start to define. We need to have almost some kind of position statement on what it is that we are as a profession. And the pushback I get from that is that they'll say, Sammy, if you get 10 different osteopaths in a room, they'll tell you 10 different things. And that's why I ask this question to the people that I sit down and have a chat to, because um, most people come back to principles. Like 9 out of 10 practitioners I've asked this question to, they'll come back and they'll say, well, it's it's the philosophy that sets us apart, the way we think about things that sets us apart.
Absolutely, it is.
And I'm not sure that we've actually defined that as a profession in Australia. Like, I don't know if I haven't seen a position statement by an association, by a regulatory body, by a university, by someone that's teaching osteopathy. So but yeah, that's I just wanted to get your perspective on that to see.
The ones I've read are so long-winded. By the end of it, you're a little bit confused about what you're actually reading because they're so long-winded.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be long-winded. You just state the principles of osteopathy and what they are, and that's if you're an osteopath, this is the way you think about the human body. Tim
was talking about this subject 30 years ago, and because the same subject was being spoken about then, and he would describe the profession when it became legitimized, when we got statutory recognition. And I remember when it came in, we were near the Houses of Parliament, so we were treating a lot of MPs, both Conservative and Labour, and they were like, this really works. Where is it politically? And we said, well, we're trying to get statutory recognition. And we did, and we had Conservative and Labour MPs on both sides supporting it, and the royal family were very good as well. And but I remember Tim at the time saying, with that legislative statutory recognition, then comes legislation that tries to make us all like minor orthopedics, and that's not osteopathy doing testing.
No, it's it's the I guess the move towards evidence-based medicine is something that has to be navigated with a very cautious kind of approach, and not that evidence-based medicine is wrong or bad, but I think the notion that osteopathy and evidence-based medicine can't coexist together I think that's a flawed position. I think there's a place for evidence, but then there's also a place for an approach that gets a result where the evidence stops. And you've seen this in your practice where people have come to see you who have seen many other types of practitioners, orthopedic surgeons, GPs, all types of other practitioners, and then you apply osteopathy and you get a result with them.
And we need that evidence-based, as you say, and I agree, it can work in unison. But, that doesn't help when the MRI comes back and I'm saying to the person, because they're stressed that nothing's showing, I'm like, no, that's good. It's just demonstrating it's not organic, it's not structural, that we can't see it. That means it's functional. It's what we were saying. It's that rotation that I can palpate. But evidence-based medicine doesn't like that rotation that I can palpate because palpation isn't standing well against evidence-based.
Well, no, it's not. It's not n equals 1, right? Like you can't just reduce the patient to a single variable. My next, I guess, the thought on that is, you said that Tim talked about this many years ago, and I go back to one of the principles of osteopathy that says that rational treatment is based on the first 3 principles. Rational treatment is based on the principles of body, mind, spirit, self-regulation, and structure and function. And I guess that's the definition of what an osteopath is somebody who applies rational treatment based on those first 3 principles.
Mm-hmm.
So osteopathy has been well defined from the beginning. I think we've just complicated it. We've let it kind of, especially as we've taken on more modalities. And there's nothing wrong with that. Expanding your toolbox, there's nothing wrong with expanding the toolbox.
Yeah.
But as we've taken on more modalities, I think somewhere along the line we've almost, not that we've forgotten, but I don't think we've really planted the tree with really deep roots in there to kind of say, look, no matter how many different branches we have off this tree, we all share the same common tree roots.
Yeah. Well, those other modalities are just to support our osteopathic principles, dry needling to get a change in a tissue.
You're doing the shock wave, you're doing the dry needling. It doesn't matter. It's just another tool in your toolbox.
Yeah, it still comes under the osteopathic principles.
Mm. Yeah, and even these days, with like especially through COVID, a lot of the telehealth stuff that went on, you could practice osteopathy just by having a chat to somebody, by kind of giving them the advice through the lens of osteopathy and what they can do. And you just mentioned that you saw a patient there, her eyes clean, and you said, well, this must be functional. Let's talk about your lifestyle. Let's talk about what you're doing. Let's see how we can make a change to the functional things you're doing in your day to day life. And that's a very osteopathic approach. So that doesn't, that so you the tools don't really matter too much. You're right there, Cliff. They just support what we do.
Yeah, it's the principles
Yeah,
every time.
yeah, definitely, definitely. I want to ask you also about some of the challenges that you're facing at the moment in terms of business. We saw a big change in what happened through COVID and so forth. What are the biggest challenges for you at the moment in terms of running your business? Do you have anything that you kind of you're finding challenging, or you're leaving that all up to Melissa to kind of deal with and just crack the whip over you two to keep you going?
And we love that, by the way. Yeah, especially Peter. Oh, your wife is such a hard ass. And I'm like, yes, and you love it.
Peter's having fun with a whip being cracked.
You know him well.
Right.
So look,
Yeah.
yeah, the biggest challenge is me getting old. I mean, I'm 57 this year, and it's I do 25,000 steps around that table. That's just minimum each day, and then if I walk
Yeah.
in, walk home, I'm doing 35 to 40,000 steps. And I've only had the app a couple of years, and I've already walked from Sydney to Rome. Isn't it amazing how far we walk in a lifetime?
I've
So
never measured it, so I'll take your word for it. Yeah, I tend to
it's
agree with
just
you.
like with a little Fitbit. It's just measuring movement of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
arm. So they count it as a step. Um, yeah, and I will be looking over the next 5 to 8 years to, reducing my hours and doing more gentleman's hours and cutting back where I can, because I want longevity in this. I enjoy
Mm,
practice and I want to have some fun with it still. And I don't want to burn out.
mm,
And when COVID came, I realized I was burnt out. I didn't know I was
mm,
until I stopped. And, we were at that time starting to run 20-minute lists and
mm,
even 10 at times. And we were having discussions around, a patient can't book in a 10, but if there's someone we know and there's someone, we've seen for a period of time, we're starting to really narrow our skill down. And
mm,
I know, and that sounds a bit chiropractic-y, but I did find that when I went from that half hour to 20, it really made my brain focus more and more. And time would warp in the room. And instead of polite chit chat, I would really just get on with what I needed to do. What 5 things do I need
mm,
to that body to make a change so that when they walk out, they feel different, they feel better. That carries on
mm,
improving beyond my needing to treat them for weeks in between. And it really started foaming down the skill. But at the same time, it meant that we saw an awful lot of people, and then we started seeing people back to back. And before our holiday, we were doing some ridiculous days. And then when COVID
mm,
came, it reset everything. And we've gone back to half hour
mm,
lists because
mm.
Peter felt the same.
Yeah. I want to push back a little bit there, Cliff. You said that, that felt a bit, people would criticize that as being a bit chiropractic. I disagree there, mate. I think especially if you've been treating a patient for a while, you understand their pattern, you understand their pattern of dysfunction, you know what you need to do, you've got the skill set to do it, to apply it. The chit chat's great, it's fine, but I think especially in the CBD, people are also want to get back to their daily tasks.
Right.
They're happy for you to go in there, do what you got to do, get the diagnosis right. And that's a big skill set too, right? With an experienced practitioner, you're right on the money with your palpatory diagnosis there. You get that right, and you go in there and you do the 4 or 5 things that you think are going to be the best stress application to get the recovery and adaptation that you need, and then you go, well, I'm actually becoming more efficient at what I'm doing. And I think once you do that too, you learn what works and what doesn't. Because if you do everything, if you spend you do from head to toe, Well, next time they come in, you got to do the head to toe again. Like you can't, you do this general, what we call a general osteopathic treatment, and you don't know what works and what doesn't. But in that way, you're actually educating yourself because you're backing your palpatory diagnosis. You're saying, this is what I found. This is what I'm going to treat. This is what I'm going to measure the next week when they come back in. We're going to see if there's been a change. Mate, that's not chiropractic. That's osteopathic. That's very osteopathic, and nobody should confuse that with being a 5-minute adjustment from head to toe. That's not what that is. That's you being very calculated and using the skill set that you've built up over the years to get a really good diagnosis and just go in there and be efficient.
Well, my wife would always say, "Why do I only get 5 minutes and other people get 20?" I said, "Because I know you well."
Because you know your wife. you know what's going on there. And you can chit chat to her later as well,
right?
Yeah.
But look, the people in the CBD, if we're running 2 minutes late, and you're seeing a lawyer, they're like, "Oh, you're running late today."
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, they got meetings to go to and things like that,
and they come out in the day. When I worked in the country, we're working at Tim's. People want to see you before work, at lunchtime, and they're after work. But in the CBD, what I love about it is they don't want to see you after work. They want to go home. They want to see you in work time. So they're happy to see you.
Yeah, they'll book you in.
Yeah, morning, mid-afternoon.
They'll book you in. So you book them in, but they've booked you into their day too.
Totally. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely, I think that's and you kind of attract the patients that you what's the thought I'm looking for here? Like you'll keep the patients that appreciate what you do. The fact that you're doing things in a very structured manner that's very on time, bang, 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 and they're happy with that,
Yeah. If they feel better.
And I think also what happens is that those patients become very results orientated instead of time orientated.
Yes.
They don't care that you spent 10 minutes with them. They just care that they feel better and their condition is improving. And they're ultimately the best patients that you want. You don't want somebody that's trading your time for money. You'll never win that way. You'll always be trading your time for money.
Yes.
It's better to trade a result for money, So that's and the reason why I'm saying all this, because for the listeners out there, especially the younger practitioners, I think there's a bit of a trend at the moment, not only within osteopathy, but also across healthcare, it's like you're packaging a service. This is the service they offer. You get a minimum of 30 minutes hands-on treatment. You get a proper analysis. You get this, you get that, you get that. It's like a package deal. Like a little hamper that you get for the money that you pay. Instead of that's very service focused rather than being results focused. And I think we need to go back to a more of a results focused mentality because that's what osteopathy is all about, right? Like, we want to get a result for the patient.
And Tim Oxford's words that he would resonate, your intent behind what you do, Cliff. And when you
there you go.
They leave that room and the primary aim is you want to make them feel better than the way they felt when they walked in. And if you're not, then you want to have a really good explanation as to why it's going to take longer for them.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree with you there, mate. So you said that you've kind of COVID came along and you put the brakes a little bit on that. What's happening in the next 5 years for you, Cliff? Where are you going, mate? What's happening in practice? What do you said you're cutting down a little bit? What's the plan?
As I said, yeah. So I've stopped working insane days. I used to work from 8:30 till 6, and it would be pretty full a lot of the time. I'll be asking Melissa if I could have time to go to the toilet. But now I start later on that day, and I start later on a Monday and later on like 10:30, and I'll work till 6.
Yeah.
But sometimes tomorrow I'll be full. I'll be back to back until 6. But and then on a Thursday I finish earlier. On a Friday I finish earlier. Yeah, I'm not working one full insane day again.
Yeah, I want to take you back a little bit to, I guess, the peak of your physical practice. So let's look at the time where you were really, you had the physical capacity to treat a large volume of patients, and you had the mental capacity, you had the drive, and the will to want to do something like that. What kind of numbers were you seeing per week then, Cliff?
Oh,
Yeah, we do like 20 a
85.
day.
Yeah, it would be between 80 and 90.
Yeah. So over a 5 day, you're doing about, roughly just up to 20 a day, but between 15 and 20 patients a day.
Yeah. I always worked half down a
Yeah.
Friday. That's including a half down a Friday and a half down
Yeah.
a three-quarter down a Tuesday.
Okay.
And
Right.
on
And
times
so
before
do
holidays,
you,
it would go into like 28 people that I'd see in days leading up before a holiday. That used to get painful.
mm, mm. Do you credit, I know that hindsight's always a good thing to have. And I know you did a lot of volume in those days. Do you credit that time of your career as really building, I guess, a solid foundation, a solid base of being able to recognize the different patterns and really, really kind of solidifying the trust in your own palpatory diagnosis? Just seeing the volume of patients and be able to do that. Did that really hone your skills? Do you credit that volume, now that you look back on it, would you credit that volume as being a real kind of important part of your career?
Sammy, do you know hugely that is the brain. You know, like people cram before an exam. You know, when you've got
Mm.
that limited time. I remember seeing a piece of research on the guy that wrote about that 4 day week, and the same specific
Yeah.
time was given to time poor as well as time rich, and the time poor people did a better job. The human brain, it just compresses, and I feel as if I became a fantastic practitioner as a result of limiting my time in the treatment room. It honed my skills, and I've kept that.
Mm.
But I don't want to work that hourage anymore. I want to do the half hour because
Yeah.
I'll be more relaxed. I want to go at a slower pace. I want to enjoy clinic more, and I want to do it for more
Yeah.
years.
But you've got that ammunition though there, right? If you ever need it, like if you ever have a day where you've got a few patients, and then you might get three more of your really good patients that call you up. They're in trouble. They need to see you. You go, you know what? Get them in. It's go time, and it's there in your pocket, ready to use it. Is
Oh
that
yeah,
something you still kind of carry with you? Yeah.
100%. Someone needs to come in. I'm like, well, put him to 20. Put him to 20. I'll see all three in that 1 hour. That's fine, and still have
Yeah.
time to stare over. Just flick
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
mindset. Like,
Hello, everyone. Just a quick break to give you some information on where to best find me. The first place is the private Facebook group called the Successful Practitioner Pathway. I've set up this private group as a place where practitioners can go and get tips and advice on how to best accelerate their practice and improve their clinical practice skills. The second place to find me is at successinpractice.net. That is where the Success in Practice signature program is housed. You can find more information about me and how I can best help you achieve success in your practice. So, the two best places, the private Facebook group, the Successful Practitioner Pathway, and successinpractice.net. I will link to both those places in the show notes. So, for more information, please see the show notes. Now, enjoy, and back to the show.
Yeah, the reason why I asked this question, especially if somebody like yourself has been out for 30 years or so, is that we hear about a lot of this. I see a lot of there's a lot of younger kind of osteopaths, who we hear a lot about burnout, and I see young men especially who are, 26, 27, 28, and they're seeing, uh, you know, barely 8 patients, 10 patients a day over, doing 50 or 60 a week. And they're like, well, yeah, I don't want to burn out. I just don't want to burn out. And I want to be quite sensitive here with what I say, because I'm not trying to belittle anybody's efforts, right? But I just want to I want to try to explain to people how important it is for your career development as an osteopath to to have a little bit of pressure, around your backside to kind of push you into really honing your skill set. And I asked you these questions just to highlight that even with an experienced practitioner like you, Cliff, you had that pressure, you looked at, you wanted it, and it built you up as a practitioner. It didn't burn you out. Would you do you want to add anything to that? Like, do you want to, like I said, we hear a lot about burnout these days, but we're not talking about burnout from seeing 80 or 90 practitioners a week, patients a week. We're talking about, we're just saying, oh, we don't want to burn out. Like, do you think that are we being a little bit too, precious with what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it? Is the old adage of just, put yourself under the pump a little bit and see how you respond? Is that still the better way of doing things in terms of developing?
I think, everyone has more in the tank, don't they? Everyone has. And if you think your capacity, you're never near your capacity. There's always more. And there's always more time and more years that you can keep going. And when I say I burnt out with COVID, when I stopped, I did recognize that I've been working really hard for decades and I was tired. When I say burnout, I use that word loosely. I didn't have any physical symptoms other than I was just a bit tired with my adrenal glands off. But hell, if I had to do it again, I would do it again tomorrow. If I was pressurized, money became an issue, if health became an issue in the future and I had to work really hard now, I would step straight back into that tomorrow and I would maintain it for as long as I needed to. It wasn't burnout in any physical way other than I felt really tired when my adrenal glands came off. But adrenal glands, they can be pumped back up again. They can be supplemented and I can get those pumping anytime I want and I can push for as long as I need to. And I will.
Yeah, I guess, right. And do you have any advice, I guess, to younger practitioners in terms of, because what you said when we talked about burnout around COVID, you'd been doing that for many, many years. It's not like you'd just been practicing for 4 years and said, "Oh, I've had, I need to burn out." You'd been doing that for many, many years, right? And you said also something interesting, that it wasn't a burnout in the sense that you were just physically burnt out. What do you think? What do you think is a key factor in making sure that as a practitioner who is doing a high volume of patients, what are some tips you can give to people so that they don't burn out? Like, what's the most important thing that you think will save somebody from burning out when they're doing, say, 70, 80, 90 patients a week?
We at the practice, we always like to have some fun. And when I found myself, when my sense of humor stopped and people's questions started to annoy me, then I knew I needed a holiday. So I have regular holidays. I will go 3 months. I like to work really hard and then I like to have a break of some sort. That could be a long weekend with an extra day attached. But I like a little carrot on a stick. I'm a simple guy. I just want that carrot. I want to chomp to that carrot. I like the countdown. And then I need that break. And losing my sense of humor in practice is a sure sign for me that I'm needing that holiday. I also like to energetically slow things down. And when you do have 20 minutes in a room, or if you're trying to make an effective change in 10 minutes, I walk slower. I slow my pace down. I try and distort time a little bit by calming myself down. I change the way I breathe. I bring the other person in the room down with my same energy and pace. I like to slow the whole room. And ironically, that 10 minutes can feel like 20 minutes and 20 minutes feel like 40 minutes. It's amazing how time morphs when you really are conscious about just slowing that down in the room so that nothing's rushed. Everything is at a good pace. And I find that way I don't miss things either. And everything seems to flow in the practice when I make the effort of doing that. If I lose that ability, if I get a bit angst or carried away and accelerate and start kicking the table with my foot, things start not going right. They stop flowing. The treatment doesn't flow. So I just like to bring that down energetically in myself. So holidays, and I like to slow the pace down in the room.
Yeah. 2 points there that I totally agree with. I would just add to everybody listening as well, is that practice osteopathy. Like, that stops you from burning out. Like, when you're thinking like an osteopath, you're just loving what you do all the time. You don't burn out. I think part of the whole burnout thing is that we're getting into these template treatments, rehab and strength work, and we've got to give this exercise and that. Just practice osteopathy. Go back to your principles, understand what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. There has to be rationale, good osteopathic rationale behind what you do. And if you stick to that and you practice osteopathy, you're going to love what you do, and that's going to really reduce the effort that you think you're putting into it. Like, I feel like burnout happens when you feel like you're putting more effort to get either the same or less of a result.
Exactly.
But when you're practicing osteopathy,
yes,
it should feel effortless. It should feel like things are kind of flowing and there's a rationale behind what you do.
Yes.
And then you don't really feel a burnout. It's like the pedal on the accelerator can just keep going and going, and those revs keep going up, and the engine just doesn't heat up.
Exactly. And instead of a thought of how I'm performing here, if you come from that place and that mental intent of how can I help this person? What do I need to do to support this person right now? It might be one thing in that treatment room, but if you come from that place, then you're not feeling like a puppet or a person who's got to perform. That sort of energy would certainly give an anxiety that would create that feeling of fatigue.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let me ask you this now in terms of how you're seeing osteopathy as a profession on a whole. Tell us about, the landscape of osteopathy in Australia at the moment. What do you think are some of our biggest challenges in terms of a profession, rather than maybe talking about business to consumer? What are some of the challenges that osteopaths face as a profession in terms of moving forward within the landscape of broader healthcare in Australia?
I don't think I'm a good person to ask that question. I think there's many practitioners out there that would answer that far better than myself. Have you chatted to Carolyn Stone about this?
I haven't. I think she's someone on my list that I want to talk to. So
that would be a fantastic question for Caroline Stone.
Yeah. And do you think that is there anything there in terms of either from a regulatory framework or something you see within, education? Are there things that you would like to see done either differently, or do you think that there are things that are being done really well? That obviously you're seeing some associates and some new graduates that are coming out, and then also you're seeing, how broader allied health is shaping. Do you see that osteopathy is well positioned at the moment? Are we in the same place that we were, say, 10, 15 years ago? Are we in a better place, or are you just, agnostic on that question?
Well, when I came over 26 years ago, as a practitioner, I'd already been out 5 years then. I was number 367 in the registry. So that's how many osteopaths there were then. In the registry now, how many are there? 3,800 odd?
Hard to say. I'm number 750.
Right.
And I graduated in 2003. I was that's 10 years after you arrived, I think, or 10 years. Is that right? When did you arrive in Australia?
Yeah, in 98.
All right. So that's okay. So that's 5 years after you arrived, and I was 750. So in 5 years, we'd pretty much doubled the profession. And so we're probably around the 3,000 mark at the moment.
Yeah. I think
so from when you came in 98, almost 30 years, 28 years.
Yeah.
We've gone from 300 and whatever it was that you were to almost 3,000, I think, or just over 3,000. So with 10x the profession in terms of volume.
Bigger, it's growing. Look, my concern is that there is a great deal of emphasis and combining of study with physios and chiros or other health practitioners and not enough osteopathic principles, and that we are performing a lot of those orthopedic tests, and it's all becoming quite blended with that orthopedic testing and our principles of osteopathy are being diluted. That would be my greatest concern.
And I think a lot of the practitioners I've discussed, I've put this question to everybody, and most practitioners who have been out for anything more than 10 years, 12 years will offer the same answer. I guess as a follow up to that question, I would ask you: do you feel like do you feel that the environment within the profession allows you to voice that opinion, or do you feel like that if you have that opinion, you know, it might not be well received, or you don't really have a position on that?
Well, thank you for what you're doing, because you're giving myself in a relaxed environment the ability to just have an opinion and to air it, and people to listen to it and either agree or disagree. And then I'm sure they will have an opportunity at some stage with you to air their opinion. And airing opinions, and if you're seeing a conglomerate of a similar opinion, then now we're gathering some information here, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, and that's why I ask it, because I think also there needs to be an environment. And I mean, I kind of started this podcast as a way to reach out to people and speak to different osteopaths and just put things on the record with more experienced osteopaths too. But I think we need to create an environment as a profession where Cliff can come out and say, "Listen, I'm a bit I'm uneasy." You don't have to say I'm unhappy, but I'm a bit uneasy how, you know, we're not really giving our osteopathic principles a fair shake, you know, in what we do as a profession and maybe throughout our education, our current education systems. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think the more we offer that environment, I think you'll find a lot of people would kind of have that opinion. And what do you like? Where do you know, if Cliff had a magic wand and could wave us into the next 10 years, where would you like to see osteopaths and osteopathy go? Like, what would you see as a big win, Cliff? Like, you know, getting into the hospitals, you know, having more access to mainstream recognition, funding, you know, I guess more educational institutions out there. You know, where would you like to? What would you like to? I mean, in 10 years, we just said that we've increased the size of the profession. Give it another 10 years. Where would you like to see? What do you think will be a really good thing for osteopathy to achieve?
I mean, we've been in hospitals for decades, haven't we, in varying degrees. They tend to just get pressurized into a time or a waiting list and a certain type of patient that they're treating. You know, I rather like the old school of teaching where the osteopaths went to a school and they didn't combine the teaching with other students, and they were just cultured and nurtured through this environment where they just purely learnt osteopathy, and they didn't do a bachelor along with everyone else and then go off to be indoctrinated into their different philosophies that they were from day one in the first year taken through these osteopathic principles from the onset.
Yeah, and so what you're saying is you'd like to see some kind of either going back or at least holding on to some of that education.
Yeah, yeah, a school that is just an osteopathic school, and the principles are the first year.
In terms of a profession and being qualified osteopaths, how do you feel about things like, you know, expanding prescription rights and expanding imaging rights and so forth? Do you think that's somewhere osteopathy can go?
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
I think it would be. But it would also come with a, you know, like you know, your old mate Tim would say, you know, that would come with a lot more responsibility, I think, to go down. Sorry?
Red tape. There would be hoops to jump through.
There would be red tape, but also I think there'd be a lot more pressure to be, you know, more, I guess, evidence-based in your approach. And education would change. I mean, the thing is about education, when you put something in, you've got to almost take something out, because, courses don't go from being 4 years, 5 years to expanding to be 6 and 7 years, because they become more expensive. And educational institutions are becoming businesses now more so than educational institutions. And so I guess if you're going to put something like pharmacology into osteopathic education, something's got to give. And I fear that the thing that'll give is the osteopathic education. That's my fear about that. So as much as I'd love to see an expansion, I think, yeah.
Well, when doctors, they've lost their anatomical and their studies in anatomy and physiology, and they've taken on more pharmacology. So that enforces what you're saying. But it would be nice, with dentistry. You know how dentists they're not massive prescription privileges, but they're relevant to what they do. So they can prescribe Panadine Forte. And it would be nice if we could prescribe a prescription anti-inflammatory, for instance.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. Podiatrists have a similar thing, I think, where they can prescribe certain antifungal prescription medications for some of the conditions that they treat. So that would be a good example of what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
And I think expanding imaging rights would be something that could be done without I guess sacrificing much of the education, because radiology is something that's taught throughout the institutions anyway. And I think another one that would do well in expanding is direct referrals. Cliff, if you see somebody that needs to see an orthopedic surgeon for a shoulder examination, there's no reason why they need to go. I mean, you're very qualified to be able to assess that shoulder and know whether they need to see, go straight to the specialist. There's no need to go back to the GP and have them go through that process. So expanding that aspect of things, I think, would help us as a profession. So I think you're right. So I think some limited pharmacological abilities. Definitely, I think expanding the ability to radiology and just direct referrals. And there are three things that could be done. If they could be done in the next 5 to 10 years, I think, osteopaths will be better positioned within healthcare.
Those three things would be quite brilliant. Yes.
Yeah. Mate, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I know it's a late one, and you got to get up and have your morning coffee with Peter and have a laugh and a giggle about whatever it is that you guys discuss. But tell him I said g'day. I'll contact him soon and get him on an episode. Hopefully he'll be open to that. Again, thank you for joining me, Cliff. I really appreciate it, mate. And just for the record, I think this is the first time we've had a chat, and I feel like I've talked to you before. So so hopefully we can run into each other another time, and hopefully down the track you'll do a second episode as well. So yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for joining me tonight. Stay on the line with me. But for everyone else, thank you for joining me for another episode of the Success in Practice podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode coming in. We usually drop these every Monday or Tuesday of every week. So we'll catch you all in the next episode. Everybody, good night. Cliff, thank you very much.
Bye.